We will be finishing up our winter landscape by removing our tape and adding the details into our birch trees. When removing your tape, slow and steady is the way to go. Start at the base of your trunk and pull gently. I prefer to pull it up at an angle. Use your other hand to try and keep your paper pressed flat onto your table. As you take pieces off, just create one big pile of tape scraps for easy disposal. I can almost guarantee you that at some point your paper will begin to tear. If your paper starts to rip, first, don't panic. Pull very slowly and try pulling your tape in the opposite direction to hopefully stop the tearing. A little bit of tearing is not a big deal. You just want to avoid getting a hole or your paper getting really, really thin. If you feel like the paper or the tearing is getting worse and it's not getting any better, just stop and ask for help, either from me or from a neighbor. And here's a little fun fact. Real birch trees actually look like their bark is tearing or falling off. When the tree grows, its outer bark peels and sheds a lot like the skin of a snake. So if your paper has some torn or peeling bits, just consider it an attempt to make your birch tree's texture look a little bit more realistic. Once all of your tape is off, then it's time to practice the birch bark texture technique that we will be using. There are close to 60 different varieties of birch trees, but most of them are easily recognizable by their bark. Bark of the birch tree can be white, gray, yellow, silver, or even black in color, and it typically features dark horizontal lines or streaks scattered up and down its trunk. Deep ridges and knots on the bark are more characteristic of older trees. To create our texture, we will be using water-soluble markers, which basically just means that when they get wet, they will dissolve and their colors will bleed. It'll look a little bit more like a watercolor. Look through your marker box and pick out the neutral colors, so blacks, grays, browns, and tans. On a separate piece of paper, draw a few pairs of vertical lines to kind of simulate your tree trunks. You're going to experiment with different colors to see which pair will fit your artwork best. Put a line of one color down the left-hand side of your tree, and then put a different color down the right-hand side of your tree. You'll get your brush wet and you'll paint a vertical line down next to your marker, but try not to touch your marker just yet with the water. Then get your brush wet again, and now you can brush down over your marker. You should start to see your marker kind of bleed into that first line of water if they're touching. You can use your brush to pull some horizontal lines from your marker line. Rinse your brush and repeat on the other side with your second color. You'll want to add the streaks and striations while your tree trunk is still damp but not soaking wet. If you see lots of shiny areas on your tree trunk, give that area a minute or two to dry or move on to a different tree and come back to the first. Once that tree is damp, then you can go back with your marker and kind of organically place some horizontal, shorter lines coming from each side of your tree and also some in the middle. Do that with both of the marker colors. If you want to make your tree look a little bit older, you can draw some colored in semicircles to give the appearance of knots. If you notice that your marker is not really working, it could be because it's getting a little bit too wet. If that is the case, just kind of draw or scribble your marker in an empty space to get the color flowing again. As the paper dries, the marker will continue to blur and diffuse, giving a very soft edge and look to your birch trees. If you don't like your first attempt, that's why we're practicing. So try changing up your technique and just try again. If you want to experiment with different color combinations, now is your chance. Once you feel confident in your technique and your color choices, then you'll move onto your final paper and repeat those steps to add in your final details.